Yom HaShoah, it's the day of the Shoah, the day of the catastrophe, the Holocaust. That's the word there, is Shoah in Hebrew. It is marked on the 27th day in the month of Nisan, which is, of course, the month we're in, which is mostly April, a week after the 7th day of Passover, and a week before Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day for Israel's foreign soldiers. It marks the anniversary, actually, also of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And by the way, this year is the 80th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, if you know anything about that. By the way, Nisan the 27th was April 19th on the calendar this year, which is the day. Of course, the evening is April 18th, where the Jewish day starts. But that's when Yom HaShoah was. We, of course, connected to the closest Friday as a service of memorial service on this day. The date was selected by the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, on April 12, 1951. The full name became formal in a law that was enacted by the Knesset on August 19, 1953, a few days before my birthday. Although the date was established by the Israeli government, it's become a day commemorated by Jewish communities and individuals worldwide. If you'll skip a paragraph and pick it up where it says, since the early 1960s, since the early 1960s, the sound of a siren on Yom HaShoah stops traffic and pedestrians throughout the state of Israel for 2 minutes of silent devotion. We had a video of that several years, and we played it several years in a row. We need to bring that back for those of you that haven't observed it or been able to see it, but it's an amazing thing. Everything in Israel stops for 2 minutes. I mean, everything. Traffic in the middle of the road. Of course, they probably pull off to the side. Nothing moves. Nothing moves for 2 minutes, and it's solemn. It's reflective. It's just amazing. It's just an amazing 2-minute period of memorial. Nothing stops. Everything stops, excuse me. Nothing moves. The siren blows at sundown and once again at 11 a.m. on this date. All radio and television programs during this day are connected in one way or the other with the Jewish destiny in World War II, including personal interviews with survivors. Even musical programs are adapted to the atmosphere of Yom HaShoah. There's no public entertainment on Yom HaShoah in Israel, as theaters, cinemas, pubs, and other public venues are closed throughout Israel. In North America, Jews in North America, let's skip a paragraph. Jews in North America observe Yom HaShoah within the synagogue as well as in the broader Jewish community. Commemorations range from synagogue services to communal vigils and educational programs. A few congregations find it more practical to hold commemorative ceremonies on the closest Sunday to Yom HaShoah. Since the Jews don't meet for church on Sunday, they're free on Sunday to meet and gather. Many Yom HaShoah programs feature a talk by a Holocaust survivor, and it's getting to the point where Holocaust survivors, sadly, are getting few and far between. And of course, there's children of Holocaust survivors and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors that continue and carry on the message that they had and the remembrances that they had. And of course, our guest tonight, our guest speaker tonight, is a child of a Holocaust survivor, so we'll have his experience as well. Of course, he was here last year and shared as well on that issue. Anyway, a talk by a Holocaust survivor, a recitation of appropriate songs and readings, or viewing of a Holocaust-themed film, which we've had in the past. Some communities choose to emphasize the depth of loss that Jews experienced in the Holocaust by reading the names of Holocaust victims one after the other, dramatizing the unfathomable notion of 6 million deaths. Many Jewish schools also hold Holocaust-related educational programs on or near Yom HaShoah. Rituals associated with Yom HaShoah are still being created and vary widely among the synagogues. Attempts have been made to observe this memorial at home. One suggestion is that every Jewish home should light a yahrzeit or a memorial candle on this day. And that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to light 6 candles and in memory of 6 million. A brother by the name of Mitch Glazer, who I've known for many years as well, and is a dear brother, and has been extremely active in Jewish outreach and is one of our leaders of Jewish outreach in our day and time. And he shares a personal testimony of his visit to Auschwitz. My wife also visited Auschwitz too, and she shared a little bit a couple of years ago. Anyway, he writes this, Mitch writes this: "I went to visit Auschwitz for the first time some years ago. As I walked through the restored Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp located near Oswiecim, Poland, I was moved beyond words by the horrors of the inhumane treatment of the Jewish people suffered at the hands of the Nazis. It was a very raw experience, but I was not prepared for what I saw looking at a sampling of the suitcases gathered by Nazis and exhibited for all to see." You know, if you go to one of these camps, or we're one of these camps where they have exhibitions of things, and of course the suitcases and the hair and the things that were taken from the Jewish people, the shoes piled up, it's still astonishing to look at that. But anyway, he was looking at the suitcases, I guess looking at names, and he says, "As I slowly paced through this section, I came face to face with a bright red suitcase with the name Marguerite Glazer emblazoned on its front." Of course, that's his name, Mitch Glazer. Anyway, I found out later that Marguerite was German and born on July 6, 1888. Direct relative or not, we shared the same last name. Reading about the Holocaust, looking at family pictures, listening to lectures, or even watching graphic movies would never be the same for me. The Holocaust would forever be deeply personal. I bonded with my greater Jewish family at that moment, all 6 million, in a way that I had never done before. There's also a way to look up the name of a Jewish person who died in the Holocaust in the Holocaust Museum website. I discovered, listen to this, I discovered that there were 2,878 Glazers listed who died in the Shoah, in the Holocaust. Imagine that, 2,878. We also know that this online list is not complete, and there are many others included at the Holocaust Museum itself, simply horrifying. And of course, he has a little introspection here, and he says, "I continue to ask myself how God could allow this to happen to his chosen people. I still find this question impossible to answer, and quite frankly, it is very difficult to answer." And he finds it impossible. Well, I find it that way too. Even though I do have things that I share with people, but it's a hard thing to deal with. I trust that God, who created and called the Jewish people, is loving and just. I do too. The Holocaust will always challenge my faith. I appreciate his honesty there. But at least I know that Jesus, the Jewish Messiah, understands unjust suffering better than I ever will. And he loved and trusted his heavenly Father, even as I do, as do I. I like to tell my Jewish family and friends that true believers love the Jewish people and consider themselves covenant cousins. There is a somewhat mysterious and close relationship between born-again believers and the Jewish people that is hard to explain, but true. Thank God for the many ways Yeshua followers show love and grace to their Jewish friends and neighbors, and especially for the prayers offered for the peace of Jerusalem that is desperately needed today. Anyway, he goes on and shares more, but those were some of the paragraphs that I felt like I wanted to share with you. Ed and Loretta are dear friends of ours, and brother and sister, that I've absolutely loved for gosh, going on, 15, 16, 17 years now. Ed is son of a survivor. His mom was on the way on a train, ready to be in going to a concentration camp. And Loretta or Ed, you might just share briefly how that you managed to escape, and then or how that happened, how your mom escaped, and if you could just do that just briefly, and then we'll go ahead and kindle the candles as well. Okay.
Yeah, like my mom,
Do you want me to tell it?
okay. His mom was rounded up with a lot of other Jews and was put on the train to Auschwitz. She tells, I believe her sister and her mom were on there too, but she never saw them again. The train was packed like this. All you could do was stand. You couldn't move. You couldn't relieve the pressure on your feet. You couldn't sit down. You couldn't go to the bathroom. You were just packed. And they were all terrified. Nobody knew what was going to happen. After a while of traveling, the train was stopped. And they opened some of the doors, the cattle doors. They were in cattle cars, not what we would consider a train. Anyway, they opened them, and the Nazi officer started picking people out. You, get off. You, come. You, out. You, out. They had no idea why they were being picked or anything else. So the Nazi soldiers loaded them up into trucks, like pickup trucks and even bigger trucks. And they started taking off and going in different directions. And what they were picked for was to be slaves on farms because all the men were in the army. And the army needed food, and the nation needed food, and they needed the farmers to produce what they were used to producing. So she was put on a farm with an old man whose son was the one that was in the army, and the son's wife. And was there a child? I don't think there was a child. It was just them two. And she slept in the barn. Her only warmth came from hay. She had no pillow, no blanket of any kind. She was worked like a mule. Everything you can possibly think of that would need to be done on a farm, she was required to do it, and done it. He was very mean to her. He beat her for the least reason. He was very cruel. It reminds me of how the slaves in America were treated by cruel masters. It's the same kind of demonic hatred. And anyway, she survived. She was very little bitty thing. She's this big, okay? Tough as nails. She's 96, and she's got a little bit of Alzheimer's, but losing her memories just a little bit. But you talk about tough. Oh, she's tough. And love, well, I'll tell you. Anyway, so they heard that Germany had surrendered and the Americans were coming. So the old man raised his fist to her, excuse me, baby, raised his fist to her and said, "You tell them I treat you good or I'll beat you." And she looked right up at him and she said, "Go ahead, I'll tell them that too. I'm going to tell them everything." And so she was picked up along with all the others that they could find from the farms and taken to, they had created in Germany a gathering place to bring all the people that had been put on the farms. And I don't know about if any of them were Auschwitz survivors or not, but, or the other places which I can't pronounce, but they were taken to a gathering place, and they basically had barracks for them to stay at, but they actually had blankets, you know, and they were giving clothes to wear and shoes to wear and food to eat. And they gathered them together, and in their own languages, they were gathered according to their languages. They were asked, "What do you want to do? And we will help you do it." And so that was the, I hope it was the Americans that did that. But anyway, so she was the group, she wanted to go to America. She didn't want to be over there anywhere. She just wanted to go to America. They had had contact with the American soldiers since they were released from all their slave farms. And everybody, wanted to just get away. They didn't feel like they could trust any of the countries around whatever country and she was from Ukraine. That was the country that she was from. So she wanted to go to America. So they said, okay, and they started filling out paperwork for her. And they had dances for the adults that, had been made into slaves and, tried to cheer them up, food and dances and stuff. And that's where she met his dad. His dad is from Poland. And did he speak anything besides Polish?
A little bit of English.
He spoke a little bit of English. And very tough guy that had, as a Polish man, he had joined the American Army. And so they met each other, they danced a couple times, they decided they were going to get married. So they, together as a couple, they got married. He started working, and did she work over there? No. She was busy being pregnant and raising kids. 4. Of their 8 children, 4 of them were born in Germany. Ed spoke German before he spoke anything. And, but he also learned Polish and Ukrainian. And it's so funny, if you, when he was growing up, she wouldn't talk about being Jewish at all. But, she cooked Jewish food. After we started going here, one of the first things that Ed said at one of the food things is, there's those potato patties my mom used to make, which are latkes, yeah. And so, as a couple with a growing family, they applied to go to America as a family, and they had to get a sponsor, and they had to get a certain amount of money to be able to go. And was there anything else?
No.
Ed's first language was German, but he also learned, what else did you learn? Ukrainian and Polish?
Yeah, Polish and a little bit Ukrainian.
A little bit of Ukrainian, more Polish. And so him and some of his other siblings were born there, and they were finally, you want me to stop? I'm sorry. Anyway, they came to America, and all their children are happy and have families, and they're very blessed to be in America, and they don't want to be anywhere else.
When I was preparing for what I was going to share on Yom HaShoah this year, because I was in California last weekend to do a service on Yom HaShoah, and I had the privilege of sitting down and spending a few minutes with the speaker that came after me, who was a 100-year-old Holocaust survivor. He had survived the Lodz ghetto in Poland, and then survived Auschwitz. He had an incredible story, and these people are very, very few and far in between. The first-hand witnesses. So this is important that we continue to remember the Holocaust. And this year, as I was looking at the name, Yom HaShoah, the day of the catastrophe, or the full name, as my brother said at the beginning, means the day of remembrance of the Holocaust and of heroism. And I thought, let's commemorate a somber, solemn, sad day in history, the day of the Holocaust, but let's look at the other side of it. So I wanted to look at heroes of the Holocaust. And I did not want to look at the ones that you all already know. So let me, where are we on the PowerPoint? We're not on the PowerPoint. Okay, so we need to start. There you go. All right. So let me get on mine too, because I need to be tracking with you. Otherwise, we're going to be out of sync. All right. So you'll understand what I mean by the title. It was the most natural thing to do. Oh, look at this. Olivier Melnick, People Ministries. There's no Chosen. Chosen is gone. I just noticed that. I do my best proofreading after I hit send. You know what I'm talking about? So First of all, to set the stage, I'm going to talk about heroes. I'm going to talk about people making a difference, people standing up against evil. Look at this man next on the next slide. You see this man? They're all saluting, doing the Nazi salute. This man is just going like this. He says, I ain't doing it. You won't force me to do it. I want to be this man when it comes to helping my people, when it comes to making a difference, and we live in a crazy world. I want to be this man. The next slide shows you a window, and if you see through the window, there is a flag with a swastika, but the window across the street is a Jewish home, and it has a Hanukkah for Hanukkah. This is what I call chutzpah. Chutzpah, you know, the boldness, the guts to speak up and say exactly, who you are and what you're all about. So those are just two little pictures to set the stage. As I'm going to talk about heroes of the Holocaust, you'll see that slide a couple of times. The next slide here is Anne Frank, picture of Anne Frank. And just keep this in the back of your mind. Those who hid Anne Frank were breaking the law. Those who killed her were following it. As we remember what people did to help the 6 million victims. And the reason why I want to talk about the heroes of the Holocaust tonight is because, think about it, had it not been for them, it would be more than 6 million. 6 million is a huge number. One of them is my maternal grandfather, Maurice Weinsweig. That's just one of them. And each story is a unique story. If you ever had a chance to go to the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., this is well conveyed because when you walk into the museum, they give you a little passport. It's a little printed passport with the name and a photo of a Jewish person. You have no idea when you start which one you're going to get. They just give you one and you turn it in at the end. But you follow the fate of that person, and by the end of your trip through the museum rooms, you find out if that person made it out of the Holocaust or if they perished. It becomes very personal. And that's what needs to happen with the Holocaust. If we don't want to forget, if we don't want our children and grandchildren to forget, it has to become personal. For me, it is because I lost a member of my family, and I have devoted the last 22 years of my 26 years with Chosen People to teaching, writing, doing conferences all over the world on the topic. But for all of us, it has to become personal. So the people I'm not going to talk about today, we just saw the slide flash on in front of your eyes, are the famous one. Not because I don't like them, they're wonderful, but you already know about them. You know about Corrie ten Boom, you know about Oskar Schindler, you know about Raoul Wallenberg, you know them, you've heard about those names. The third one maybe a little less, but the first two, for sure. Who hasn't seen Schindler's List? Who hasn't read the Hiding Place? I mean, you know those stories. They're wonderful stories. I want to talk about other people. We're going to skip the next slide, and we're going to go to the one with the statement on... so skip the next slide at that one. I want to set the mood, so to speak. Let us keep it all in perspective. If we held a moment of silence for every victim of the Holocaust, we would be silent for 11 and a half years. If I was to start right now and we would have the names of the 6 million victims scrolling in front of us on the screen, just enough time for us to read the name and have a couple of seconds before the next name, we would be in this room for 11 and a half years. Let that sink in. That is a long time. That's a lot of people. So, I want the message I'm going to share tonight to be an encouragement, to be a model, and to be an incentive. Why? An encouragement because we're going to talk about heroes and it should be encouraging. A model because we want to model our lives after what some of these people did. And I want to be an incentive because I'm hoping that by the time we're done tonight, you'll go like, I see that they did something. I wonder what I can do in case this happens again. And friends, we are at a place right now. I started doing this for like in 2000, when I used to say we are getting dangerously close to the 1930s and 1940s again. We're there. It's been 22 years. We're there. We are in the 1930s and 1940s again. So we have to do something. That's where we are right now. So that's why I want to encourage you with some of the heroes. The first one is a Chinese man by the name of, now I'm hoping I'm not going to butcher any of those names. If you're watching online, I apologize in advance. The first one is Ho Fengshan, and he was born in China. He was appointed the consul general in Vienna in Austria in 1937, and he started to issue visas to Jewish people. By the way, I failed to mention that the entire presentation is available as a PDF, and all you have to do is have a clipboard on the back, put your name on it, I'll send it to you. I don't charge for my notes. I mean, I want people to have the stuff. So the books are for sale, but my notes are never, so don't take notes tonight, just listen, pay attention. I'll give you the PDF of the entire thing if you want it. Just give me your email, name and email, and I'll send it to you. So the first one, Ho Fengshan, started to issue visas to Jewish people. He disobeyed his superiors to do so. He just disobeyed. He knew he could get in trouble. He issued thousands of visas to Jewish people, especially after Kristallnacht, November 1938. The night of November 9th through 10th of 1938 was known as the night of broken glass, Kristallnacht in German, and that's when a lot of pogroms, a lot of organized riots against the Jewish people. That's what pogrom means. And a lot of boycott of businesses and breaking of front windows of businesses and setting on fire of a lot of synagogues. It all took place in Germany that night. And I don't have time to go into details of why it got started and how it got started. Suffice it to say, all serious historians, we're not talking about revisionists on the Holocaust, people who said that it never happened, but all serious historians agree that Kristallnacht was the defining moment for the beginning of the Holocaust. The final answer to the Jewish question, as the German used the euphemism to describe the Holocaust. Kristallnacht was that moment. From Kristallnacht forward, we are now in the beginning of the Holocaust, and then it never stopped until the end of the war. So that was the moment, 1938, November 1938. So when he saw what happened, he decided, I really want to push the paper as much as I can, as fast and as many as I can, so I can help Jewish people. Ho Fengshan, in December 1938, 7,000 Jews had crossed the border towards Italy and Switzerland, just in a couple of months. Most of them had Chinese visas. Now, China did not require visas to get in, but the visas were not made for these Jewish people to get into China. They could care less. They were made so that they could get out. Once they were out, they were doing whatever they wanted. And when he was asked later in life, why he did, he said it was just natural to feel compassion for those persecuted and help them. It was what had to be done. So that's the first one. The next one is a German guy. So, you don't expect that from a Chinese. You expect even less from a German. Now, they were not all bad Germans. A lot of Nazis did bad things. A lot of French people with the Vichy government did bad things. But there was some good, there's good and bad everywhere. There were some good Germans. And here is one, Dr. Hans-Georg Kallmeyer was a lawyer in Osnabrück, Germany. He was stationed in the Netherlands during World War II. He was asked to help with the registration of the Jews under a special decree known as VO 641. And he saw an opportunity, albeit risky, to help Jews, to help Jewish people. Now, Jewish people would come to his office with false papers. They would come with false paper, and he would just approve them, put the stamp of approval on every single one of them as fast as he could. He knew they were false. He knew he could have been arrested. He could have been sent to the camps himself. He could have been killed on the spot. He just knew they were forged, but he just said, you know what, this is good for me. So he pushed them through the system. He is credited for having saved at least 4,000 Jewish lives that we know of. That's 4 times what Schindler saved. Now, I'm not trying to minimize what Oskar Schindler did. I'm just giving you some perspective here. A lot of people did a lot of good things, not enough, but a lot of people did a lot of good things during the war. They're unknown. Nobody knew about these people. Now he had a book written about him. known as Shedding Our Stars, the story of Hans Kallmeyer. But after the war, he very rarely spoke of his deeds. He just did it because he felt it was the right thing to do. He had to do it. He had to do something. He could not remain silent just because he was not Jewish. Then you have the unpronounceable name, but I will try anyway. WLADYSLAW BARTOSZEWSKI. That was not too bad. What? BARTOSZEWSKI, okay. Władysław BARTOSZEWSKI. Oh, we have people who speak Polish here, so I should be careful. So he participated in the defense of Warsaw and was sent to Auschwitz. Not Jewish, okay? He's not Jewish. But there were people that were sent to Auschwitz that were not Jewish. Actually, there were several million people who were not Jews, who were minority groups and different groups of people that were also sent to the camps by the Germans. They were victims as well. He joined the Polish underground in 1941 after his release of Auschwitz. He came out, he joined the underground, he became a leader of a group called Zygota, the Council for the Aid of the Jews. After Auschwitz, he met a Catholic priest, and that was a defining moment for him. The Catholic priest, I'm going to try his name, Jan Jeja, I don't know how you say that in Polish, with whom he had this dialogue, and that was a defining moment. The white dialogue on the screen is him, and the yellow is the priest answering him. And he said, how could all this be God's will? He was in Auschwitz saying the murder and the pain inflicted and the torture and the starvation and the diseases and all this stuff that we've heard about. And he was there for a short time, and he came out. And he goes, how could this be God's will? And the priest answered, don't think about why God allows evil. Think about why God saved you. It was for a reason, wasn't it? It was for a purpose. Bear witness to the truth. You saw how people are suffering. Help them. And he went, help who? He goes, and the priest goes, help those who need it. But who needs it? Those who are suffering the most. But I'm a student, Father. I have no resources with which I can do anything great. So, do something small. But don't turn your face away. People in the ghetto are suffering. Help them. The point that the Catholic priest was trying to make is that you can always do something. Big, small, you can always do something. Based on your resources or lack of resources, we all can do something. And that's what he learned from that. And as a result, we read from history that Zygota, the party that he became part of, was responsible for saving several thousand Jews. And according to one estimate, 40 to 50,000 Jews benefited in some way from its activities. He also, BARTOSZEWSKI, also fought during the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. So here's a man with no resources who lived through the horrors of Auschwitz for a little while, came out, and he decided, I got to do something. Whatever I can do, I got to do something. Then you have a Spaniard by the name of Eduardo Propero de Callejon, doing the best I can with the names. He looks like a movie star. Looks very dapper. He was the secretary of the Spanish embassy in Paris under the Nazi occupation. He issued more than 30,000 transit visas to Jews in France and Spain to go to Portugal before being caught. He was caught and sent to the Spanish consulate in Morocco. They just got rid of him and sent him to Morocco. Nobody knows about him, but look, 30,000 visas. I mean, you add the 30,000 to the 50,000 to the 3,000 to the 4,000 to all those we don't know about, and you get tens, hundreds of thousands of Jews that could have ended up in the smokestacks of Auschwitz, but did not because of these people who decided to do a little something, just a little something. And this one I actually added late. I found them after I was done with my message, but I was very encouraged. I thought it was just, I could not speak of them. Vesel and Fatima Veseli, they were a Muslim family living in a small Albanian village. Back then, almost the entire village was Muslim. They took the Mendel family, hid them, fed them, protected them through the war. They dressed them as Muslims to help them blend in with the villagers. So you had a bunch of Jews, a Jewish family, dressed as Muslims so they could get away in the village that was mostly Muslim. And This is back in the days where Jews and Muslims found a way to get along. I think that's a wonderful picture of what should happen today. Unfortunately, it's not the case. It's interesting, neither of those books are inspired like the Bible is. I want to make that clear. But I thought there was an interesting parallel that probably drove those two families to get close and befriend one another. In the Quran, again, the Quran, I'm not saying the Quran is inspired. This is the holy book of Islam. The Talmud is a compendium of Jewish commentaries on the Torah and different rabbis arguing on a lot of things. I was up at 4 a.m. this morning for some reason. I've had a very long day. And I thought later today, I should have opened a page of the Talmud that would put me right back to sleep. I didn't think of that. But the Quran says, whoever saves one life saves all of mankind. Talmud says, anyone who saves a life is as if he saved an entire world. Same thing. So I thought it was interesting to mention that. One more family I want to mention. I might have mentioned them last year, but they're worth mentioning because they're very special to me. Two simple farmers in a zone libre in southwest France, near the ocean. They took in 3 Jewish kids on their farm for the last 2.5 years of World War II. They had no connections, no money, no power, no influence. But they took those Jewish kids on their farm and kept them safe for 2.5 years. And I wouldn't be here today if it was not for them. Because they, without their bravery and compassion, because they saved my mother. They took my mother after the Gestapo came to get my grandfather to take him to Auschwitz. My mother had to get false papers immediately and get on a train south of France, get on a farm, and she stayed with that family of the 2 farmers, the Daricot, Pierre and Ida Daricot. They were recognized, and actually all these people that I've quoted to you so far, including the Daricot, were recognized as righteous among the nations by Yad Vashem in Israel, in Jerusalem. Their name is, it was very emotional. Last time I went, 2019, right before COVID, the end of the year, I went to Israel. I took a group and I went to the very back of Yad Vashem's property, and they have the wall of all the names. They used to plant trees for all the people, but they ran out of room. So they have a wall by country and by year. So I went to France. I went to 2013 when they were added to the wall, and sure enough, their name is there. They saved my mother. They did something. They had no resources. There's on my YouTube channel, you can find me on at Olivier Melnick. You'll find me on YouTube. I have a lot of videos. There is a 9-minute video from French TV. I put subtitles on it of how my mother reconnected with the 2 brothers after 7 years. You got to watch it. Every time I watch it, I cry. It's amazing how God preserved my mother through that family. And then, of course, I had the privilege of leading my father and mother to the Lord a few years ago, a week and a half before my dad passed away, and then several years before my mother would go. But both of them are now with the Lord. So the Lord preserved my mother through that family so that she would become a believer. And I did not know that, but now looking back, I'm very, very, very grateful. So looking at those unknown heroes, the list of them, the Ho Feng Shan from China, Karl Mayer from Germany, BARTOSZEWSKI from Poland, De Caillon from Spain, the Veseli from Albania, and the Daricos from France. Those are all unknown people. You would have never heard of them if you don't look for them. What did these rescuers have in common? Well, a few things. They acted as good Samaritans. And because I have all the scriptures in the PowerPoint and it's available to you, I'm not going to read through all the scriptures, but it's there for you to back up what I'm sharing with you. They acted as good Samaritans. Of course, you look at the story of the Good Samaritan in Luke 10:29 through 37. Then again, you can skip the rest of the scripture. I'm not going to read them for sake of time. A reminder that they were breaking the law, like the slide I showed you earlier about Anne Frank. They were breaking the law. They were helping, but they were breaking the law. And they knew that. And number 3, They knew the risk they were taking. And I'm reminded of the book of Esther, when Esther is trying to go into the rooms, the king's palace, and she knows that unless you're invited, unless there's a special request, you just don't barge in like this and say, hey, here I am, we need to talk. That's not the way it works. She risked her life. But look at what it says in verse 16. And thus I will go into the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish. She knew the risk. She was willing to take that risk because there was a great need for something to happen. We know the rest of the story, of course, but she didn't at that time. She was not sure of what would take place. She went in and she was willing to give her life. So these heroes, just like Esther, knew the risk that they were taking. I don't want to get in trouble here with your rabbi, but I am not saying that I'm not inviting you to civil disobedience. Okay? I don't want to say, well, you should disobey the government. This is not the kind of person I am. But if or when it would come to a place where we have to make a decision, just saying. I got this from my good friend, Dr. Andy Woods, and I think it's very clear the way he labeled it, that if we are forced towards civil disobedience, I think we need to consider 4 things. Number 1, there must be a crystal clear conflict between the laws of man and the laws of God. It's got to be clear. There must be, number 2, an exhaustion of all creative legal remedies. Civil disobedience must always be a last resort for believers. Number 3, there must be a willingness to pay the consequences. This is no light decision. And number 4, there must be a maintaining of respect for civil authorities. I get that from the book of Daniel. They committed civil disobedience several times, but they were always really respectful to Nebuchadnezzar, Belshazzar, Darius. They were all respectful every time. Oh, king, they were very respectful. So that's where we get it from. So I'm not inviting you to do it, but if you're going to consider, or if you're going to be forced towards somewhat of a civil disobedience, make sure you check all the boxes. And that's going to require a lot of effort to make sure all the boxes are checked, because you have to exhaust everything. So number 4, the heroes, were creative with what was at their disposal. Joshua 2:4-7. Rahab, she had to think quick. What am I going to do? I got to hide the spies. So she put them on the roof. She put some flax over them. She hid them on the roof. They're gone. They're not here. And then she lied. We're not going to go into the is it okay to lie in the Bible. This is not what this message is all about. That's for another time. But she hid them on the roof. She had to be creative. She had to come up with something, whatever she had at her disposal. So we have to think creatively. All I'm talking about here is in preparation for the time that could be sooner than later. And I know you're looking at me going, Olivier, I hope you're wrong. The time that would be sooner than later when we have to help our Jewish friends. And I personally think it's going to be sooner than later. So, number 5, there you go. Number 5, they never worried about how many people they helped. It was not like, well, it's too many for me. I can't do 5,000. I can't do 40,000. They didn't know that. They didn't care. They went day by day, person by person. I just do one person at a time. Here was your paper. Take it, go. Here was your visa. Take it, go. That was it. All these people. But look, Ho Feng Shan, 7,000. Karl Mayer, 4,000. BARTOSZEWSKI, 50,000. Kayeon, 30,000. Vessel and Fatima Fazeli, 1 family. Pierre Anida Darico, 3 people. My mother and her 2 cousins. To me, the 3 people were key. Because without my mother, I don't think I would be here. That's correct, right? Yeah, of course it is. So it doesn't matter how many people. Just they did something. When they did it, it was like, okay, here's the task at hand. I got to do something. I can do at least that right now. Tomorrow's another day. Now, what do we have in common with these rescuers? You think about it. We're all believers here. I'm assuming we're all believers, and I don't know who's watching online. If you're a believer, let me put it this way. As I'm going to wrap up now. I need to wrap up, right? Yes. Nobody has walked out yet, so I think I'm good on time. What do we have in common with these rescuers? I want to believe that as a believers, I'm going to find myself checking those boxes and say like, well, I mean, I can act as a good Samaritan. I should act as a good Samaritan. If I have the love of Messiah, if I have the Holy Spirit living in me, I should be willing and able to act as a good Samaritan. Am I going to have to break the law? Well, time will tell. If I break the law, am I going to be aware of the risk I'm taking? Of course I will be. Do I have to be creative? I know that I can be very creative with different things, so I know that one is easy for me. If I help somebody, I'm not going to worry about when, where, how many, how come. I'm just going to say, okay, what do you need? Let's see if we can make it happen. Let me see what part I can play in the grand narrative of taking you from A to B, whatever I can do. So we can see all this. We go like, some of you are going like, oh, I check all 5. Some of you check 2 or 3. But as believers, we check several of those boxes for sure. But here is what I want you to realize, is that we have those things in common, but what do we have above and beyond these rescuers? As far as I can tell, none of them were Christians, believers. So we have 3 things I want to bring up before I close. Is number 1, we understand God's promises. Those are things that we know are true from God's word. So we have the commonality with the rescuers, with the heroes, but on top of that, if you're a believer, you know that God promises to bless those who bless the Jews, Genesis 12:3, to curse those who curse the Jews, same scripture, to never forsake Israel, Jeremiah 31:35-37, to go after the enemies of Israel, Zechariah 12:9, to watch over Israel 24/7, Psalm 121:4, to never change, Numbers 23:19 and Malachi 3:6, to have Yeshua return because of the Jews calling on him. All those things are promises of God. We know they are true. We know if they're promises of God, they are not going to be taken back. Why? Because, again, God never changes. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. So these are promises that we can take it to the bank. We can take it to the bank. We have that above and beyond the heroes who did something. So we're in a sense, we're better equipped because we have the hope of, number 1, we understand God's promises. Number 2, we understand God's power. And I just put a few of them. I could put more. God's power. The gospel is the power of God. Now, I could put the whole verse, to the Jew first, also to the Greek. We're not going to go there tonight. But the gospel is the power of God to save lives. The word of the cross is the power of God as well. 1 Corinthians 1:18. The whole universe is God's. 1 Chronicles 29:11, that's God's power. His greatness is unsearchable. Psalm 145:3, nothing is too hard for him. Jeremiah 32:27. And that's just a few of the examples from God's word about God's power. So we understand God's promises, we understand God's power, and we also understand God's provision. We are valuable to God. Every single one of the victims of the Holocaust, every single one of the heroes who helped, and every single one of us here, or all of us, we're all valuable to God. Luke 12:24. God will meet all of our wants. Oh, wait a minute. No, that's not what it says. Needs. Now, if you're in the will of God, if you're in the center of God's will, your wants and your needs end up looking pretty close. But that's a different story. But God will meet all of our needs. Philippians 4:19. God provides for those who seek him. Psalm 34:10. There are no limits. I like that one. There's no limits to God's provision. Luke 9:1-17. So we know about God's promises, God's power, God's provision. And yes, they're all with a P because I want you to remember them. That's why I put all with a P. It's a little trick, but it's true, actually. It's the truth. And so we have that above and beyond the heroes who already did something. What can we do? What can you do? What can I do? I don't know. But be ready to do something. When the time comes, I might have said that last year, but I say it a lot. When your Jewish friend knocks on your door in the middle of the night, with his family and say, hey, I know that you love the Jewish people because you've said it to me many times. And right now, it's not safe for me to go back to my house. My car is being watched. My bank account is frozen. I cannot pull money from the ATMs. I have nowhere to go. Are you going to look at your friend and say, oh, I love Israel. I love the Jewish people. I will pray for the peace of Jerusalem, rest assured. Or are you going to open your door and say, come on in. Let me make you a meal. Let me give you a bed. Let me protect you. Let me provide for you. Let me do whatever I need to do to help you at this time of need. We're getting to this place, my friends. It's going to get, and for the Christians as well, by the way. It's not just for the Jews. But we are going to be challenged in our faith about what it means to really make a difference for the kingdom of God and help the Jewish people. Now, when we do this, when we help Jewish people, we need to remember two very important points. Is that we do it because of the gospel, and we do it with the gospel. Because if we just help a Jewish person from a humanitarian standpoint, like let me protect you, let me give you a bed and a meal, and if you give a meal to a Jewish person but they don't know about the message of salvation, then it's like sending somebody to hell on a full stomach. It doesn't work. So we have to make sure that somehow the people that we help know why we do. And that's because of the gospel, because of what God did in our life. So anti-Semitism must be fought every day, even though it will never end until Yeshua returns. I am convinced, and there's something, I changed the way I say it recently. I used to say we have to put an end to anti-Semitism. We have to stop anti-Semitism. And, I used to, push all those, one-liners. And I thought, I'm not going to say that anymore. Because I'm not going to be able to put an end to anti-Semitism. But fighting it is okay. You might not be able to put an end to the bully on the schoolyard, but tomorrow when the bully comes back, you can fight again. You can do whatever you can on a daily basis. So anti-Semitism will end when Yeshua returns and sends Satan to his retirement plan, which is in a lake of fire. That is the end of Satan's career, which, by the way, Yeshua returns when Israel says, Baruch haba b'Shem Adonai. Blessed is you, comes in the name of the Lord. Yeshua said that. Surely you'll not see me again until you say, Baruch haba b'Shem Adonai. Blessed is you, comes in the name of the Lord. When Israel, at the end of the tribulation, calls upon Yeshua and say, we want you to come back, we now see that you are the Messiah that our ancestors rejected. We want you. We believe in you. We trust you. We want you. That is when the second coming takes place, and that is the end of Satan's career. Who do you think doesn't want to go into retirement? Satan. So if you could stop the Jews from calling on Jesus, and if you could put the Christians against the Jews, then it would postpone the inevitable. And that's exactly what he's done. Satan is the creator of anti-Semitism. And he's going to do whatever he can to postpone that moment. But God has promised that it was going to take place. In the meantime, there has been and there will be many casualties, and that's where we come into the picture. So as you go home tonight after Shabbat, after the service, I want you to start thinking, what can I do? I can do something. Some people know how to cook. Some people know how to drive a bus. Some people fly planes. We all do things. We all can contribute. Be ready to contribute when the time comes and your Jewish friend or somebody calls you and say, hey, I need help with this Jewish family. Can you help? Be ready. Be in prayer about it, because the day is coming. And I want to model my life after the heroes of the Holocaust, the few of them that I shared about tonight, because they're an encouragement, they're a model, they're an incentive to me, and I hope they can be to you as well.
Among the heroes of the Holocaust, my dad was involved. He was a soldier in World War II. He wasn't a hero, but as the expression goes, he served with heroes. Came to this country in the late 30s as an immigrant from Eastern Europe. And a little more than 10 years later, Uncle Sam decided to give him a free trip back on, I think it was the Queen Mary at the time, to fight for this country. Fast forward, April 29th, 1945, his unit, the 45th Infantry Division of the U.S. Army, was on its way to Munich, which is in southern Europe, southern Germany. which is right near the town of Dachau, where the camp was located. And his unit was ordered to liberate the camp in 1945, April 29th, which is just, the memorial is just a few days away. And what I did was, I have something here. I just going to kind of read what I found on the internet, which kind of explains a little bit about what the liberation of the camp was. As usual, when the U.S. Army came to a camp, there was a little bit of resistance, the SS, the guards, but the U.S. Army at that point was so powerful and strong, there really was very little resistance. Either they gave up and surrendered, or they just fled. Or what a lot of the German officers did, or some of them did, they dressed as prisoners at the camp. But the U.S. Army was very smart, because if you were a prisoner, you would be very disheveled. The German soldiers were not disheveled, so they were found out. But needless to say, this is just an impression about what happened in 1945 when the camp of Dachau was liberated. And I read from the internet. As the 45th Infantry completed its drive on Munich, the unit was ordered to liberate the Dachau camp. On April 29, 1945, 3 U.S. Army divisions converged on the camp: 42nd Infantry, 45th Infantry, which my dad was in, and the 20th Armored. These 3 units arrived in Dachau. They discovered more than 30,000 prisoners in the overcrowded camp. Imagine that, 30,000 prisoners. And there was about 40 railway cars with dead and emancipated bodies just waiting to be cremated in the camp. Let me read a little bit further. This is from Lieutenant Colonel Felix Sparks, who commanded the 45th Infantry. Okay, he later recalled in his first impressions of Dachau, the initial shock was experienced even before entering the camp. He experienced the shock of the camp even before he got into the camp. The first evidence of horror to come was a string of about 40 railway cars sitting near the entrance of the camp. Each car was loaded with emancipated human corpses. The scene near the entrance to the confinement area numbed my senses. Dante's Inferno seemed pale compared to the real hell of Dachau. A row of small cement structures near the prison entrance contained a coal-fired crematorium, a gas chamber, and rooms piled high with naked and emancipated corpses, human corpses. As I turned to look over the prison yard with unbelieving eyes, I saw a large number of dead inmates lying where they had fallen in the last few hours or days before our arrival. Since all of the many bodies were in various stages of decomposition, the stench of death was overpowering. Immediately after Dachau's liberation, U.S. Army authorities and other Allied representatives began treating the sick prisoners, implementing health and sanitary measures to curb the typhus epidemic, and bringing in tons of food to feed the starving prisoners. The local townspeople, who knew nothing about what was going on at the camp, right at their back door. They were brought in to give the dead prisoners a proper burial. They dug the graves for these prisoners. Okay, the U.S. 45th Infantry was recognized as a liberating unit by the U.S. Army Center of Military History and the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in 1985. That unit was a hero of the Holocaust. As sad as it was, they were heroes for liberating the camp, freeing the prisoners, and burying the dead that were located in the camp that was there. The Holocaust was one of the most evil of all evil things ever done to the Jewish people and to humans in general. You know, the Jewish people always had a Haman, a Pharaoh, an Yes, thank you. A Greek king that wanted to do away with the Jewish people. But the worst of the worst was Hitler. The worst was Hitler. He wanted to totally destroy, knock out, completely eradicate Jewish people from the face of this planet. In fact, what he did is he kept artifacts, things like Torahs, mezuzahs, and other things, because he was going to put that in his museum for an extinct people. That's how evil they were. That's why we always have to say, never again.